Hi people. So before I get into the main subject matter of this video, just a quick word about the devastating tornadoes that have swept through six American states. Small town of Mayfield, Kentucky, it looks just totally devastated. These particular tornadoes, apparently, it's not unusual for December. There are December tornadoes, but apparently they're the deadliest ever in the state of Kentucky. Over 70 deaths. There was an Amazon warehouse in Illinois, I believe, where at least six workers were thought to have died when that collapsed. So altogether, it's probably going to be well over 100 people, and I imagine many, many more made homeless, businesses destroyed. It's heartbreaking to see, people, to hear people talk about that. I was watching coverage on CNN, and yeah, my heart really goes out to them because often these are family businesses. It's generations of history there, so it's a reminder of the power of nature. When I was in the States years ago, we narrowly avoided a tornado, although it was unusual for that part of the country. It was Pennsylvania, but it's a power of nature. Um, So I want to talk about something that's been in the news that's generating quite a lot of debate, and that is new smoking policy in New Zealand. Go read out this BBC article because I want to include the important information. Uh, the reporter is doesn't say actually. New Zealand will ban the sale of tobacco to its next generation in a bid to eventually phase out smoking. Now, before I continue with this, I should put a disclaimer. I'm a former smoker. Um, And my stance on smoking legislation is sort of middle ground, so that's where I lie. Just to put it out there before I continue this. Anyone born after 2008 will not be able to buy cigarettes or tobacco products in their lifetime. So that's 13-year-olds and lower now, under a law expected to be enacted next year. We want to make sure young people never start smoking, Health Minister Dr. Ayesha Farrell said. The move is part of a sweeping crackdown on smoking announced by New Zealand's health ministry on Thursday. Doctors and other health experts in the country have welcomed the world-leading reforms, which will reduce access to tobacco and restrict nicotine levels in cigarettes. It will help people quit or switch to less harmful products and make it much less likely that young people will get addicted to nicotine, said Professor Janet Hook from the University of Otago. The crackdown has been met with mixed reactions. I reckon it's a good move, really, one man told Reuters news agency, because right now there's a lot of young kids walking around with smokes in their mouth. Public are asking how they're getting these smokes, and it's also good for myself too, because I can save more money. However, others have warned that the move may create a black market for tobacco, something the Health Ministry's official impact statement does acknowledge, noting customs will need more resource to enforce border control. This is all 100% theory and 0% substance. Sonny Koshal, chairman of the Dairy and Business Owners Group, a lobby group for local convenience stores, told New Zealand's Stuff news site. There's going to be a crime wave. Gangs and criminals will fill the gap. New Zealand is determined to achieve a national goal of reducing its national smoking rate to 5% by 2025. That's just 4 years from now, with the aim of eventually eliminating it altogether. At the moment, 13% of New Zealand adults smoke, which is a pretty low percentage, really, with the rate much higher among the indigenous Maori population, where it's lower to almost a third. Maori also suffer a higher rate of disease and death. New Zealand's health ministry says smoking causes 1 in 4 cancers and remains the leading cause of preventable death for its 5 million strong population. The industry has been the target of legislators for more than a decade now. As part of the crackdown announced on Thursday, the government also introduced major tobacco controls, including significantly restricting where cigarettes can be sold to remove them from supermarkets and corner stores. The number of shops authorized to sell cigarettes will be drastically reduced to under 500 from about 8,000 now, officials say. In recent years, vaping, smoking e-cigarettes, which produces a vapor that also delivers nicotine, has become far more popular among younger generations than cigarettes. New Zealand health authorities warn, however, that vaping is not harmless. Researchers have found hazardous cancer-causing agents in e-cigarette liquids as well, but in 2017 the country adopted vaping as a pathway to help smokers quit tobacco. Okay, with any sort of legislation like this, there's always going to be debate about public health versus civic liberties. And I understand both points. I'm not a libertarian. I do believe that there should be legislation, common sense legislation, against things that are harmful to some extent. Now, looking at the information available in this New Zealand law, maybe young people will grumble about this. Maybe teenagers will, decry that they'll never get the chance to smoke with their mates. But you know, um, that's no bad thing if it means they have longer lives, and they get to become middle-aged people without having smoker's cough and so on. Um, I'm a former smoker. I was never a heavy smoker, but I did smoke. Basically, periodically on and off for roughly 8 years, from when I was 27 to 35. I'm 36 now, so I quit basically earlier this year. I quit for health reasons because I want a long life, and also, well, partly because I wanted to join the armed forces earlier this year, so I wanted to pass a medical test which requires running. And if you smoke, that is just not good for basic jogging and running and exercise. Um, and I noticed a difference when I quit. I definitely found that easier. Also money. Smoking in the UK is very expensive, and so you do save money if you quit. I'm supportive of the 2007 legislation in England and Wales, which banned smoking in public places. I believe in Scotland and Northern Ireland it was '08. I support that legislation because I remember when you used to go into nightclubs and you'd come out and you'd have the second-hand smoke, and it would be very stale and unpleasant. Um, and the point about that policy, I would say it's been an effective policy. It has reduced the number of smokers in this country, and as a consequence, it's reduced the number of smoking deaths. Now, probably far too many people still smoke and still die from smoking. But I think one problem that the medical profession has in general is their whole focus, understandably, is about health. They don't really have a vested interest in considering civil liberties. And I'm not, I would expect the doctor to talk about health. I would expect the doctor or medical boards or health departments to lobby for health. That's understandable. That's their job. But I also feel, especially with all the restrictions we've had from COVID, and I understand New Zealand's one of the strictest in the world in that regard. Um, I think that the issue of civil liberties is not a trivial one. That is the right to choose to do what we want within the law and within responsibility to others. Now, the New Zealand situation, we'll see how this happens. We'll see if it does lead to an increase in crime. If that's the case, then maybe it's a bad policy. Certainly, I think anything that stops young people from starting smoking should be welcomed. So I'm not totally against it. I wouldn't say it's a totally bad thing, but I think that a lot of people will think there's a sort of puritanical push here. And I do wonder why government focus so much on smoking when alcohol also causes deaths. Now, in the UK, I know what the statistics are. Smoking does kill a lot more people. It's somewhere in the region of 100,000 a year from smoking related illnesses, diseases. Alcohol is more like 12,000, from what I recall of the public health figures I've seen. So there is a big gap there. However, alcohol causes other problems that tobacco doesn't. I mean, when was the last time you heard about someone, bottling someone outside a bar because of tobacco? It might sometimes happen, but it's rare. I would say at least half of all antisocial behaviour in this country has alcohol as a cause, and I imagine it's similar in New Zealand, although New Zealand's quite a safe country, but I imagine they have their problems with youth delinquency and antisocial behaviour, and I imagine it would also be alcohol. I think in Britain especially, alcohol can be toxic. I mean, how often have we seen drunks getting on public transport and causing a nuisance to everyone else, or even worse, on a plane? Um, I mean, tobacco doesn't even come into that, but you can't get tobacco on a plane. You can be served alcohol. So I think there's a bit of indiscrepancy there, or a lack of consistency. Um, I've just come off a debate thread where this issue was discussed. Now, pretty much everyone except one or two people was arguing caution, and they were arguing the civil liberties thing, and there were people there saying they hate smoking. You know, they want to see people quit. I have a big problem with the stigmatizing of smokers. This is one of the things I most dislike when government pushes sort of legislation. It's stigmatizing smokers as if by engaging in illegal activity, I mean, legal if you're over the age, you're somehow a bad person. I don't think many people would rationally argue that smoking is healthy. It's not. It causes breathing problems. It causes all sorts of cancers. Heavy smokers can even get blindness. You know, there's all sorts of problems that relate to smoking. I never once, as a smoker, argued that it was good because that would be foolish. It isn't. And I was always respectful. For example, if I lit up, say a friend was visiting me, I would ask if they minded. And I would make sure I was smoking away from them. I would never smoke around children. Um, and I wouldn't break the law. I wouldn't smoke in bars or in public transport. In fact, I didn't smoke enough to do that. But I really have a big problem with the stigmatizing of smokers as if they're bad people. And I think governments need to be careful that when they're pushing this sort of puritanical legislation, like, you know, we want to get this target of zero smokers by such and such a year, they need to be very clear that they're not saying, oh, we're trying to turn society against smokers. Because as long as something is a legal activity, people have the right to do it. Now, some people might look at the video I made recently on drugs legislation. I think there's a difference because if someone is if they're snorting cocaine, they're breaking the law. If someone goes out and buys a packet of cigarettes and smokes it in their own home, they're not breaking the law. That's the difference. They both kill, and tobacco smoking probably kills a lot more people than Class A drugs. But I've no problem with Class A drugs being illegal. I don't see any logic in that universal approach of legalizing all drugs. I think it's naive. And I think even if you did, it might take away power from gangs, but you would still have all the health effects from that. You'd still have behavioral problems that are associated with certain drugs. You would still have a situation where you would have to legislate to get people to quit. I mean, there's been so much effort spent on getting people to quit tobacco smoking. So if you legalized cocaine, heroin, presumably there'd have to be public health campaigns to say this product causes X, Y, and Z. And then there's advertising campaigns against that, which poses the question, why legalize it in the first place? Um, the argument that, you know, legalize all drugs, it will reduce crime, it might be true. I wouldn't say there's, you know, that's totally false, but my issue with that is normalizing nasty, nasty substances like cocaine, heroin, and even more unpleasant stuff. I don't think they should ever be normalized. I think they're evil. I think they mess up people's lives and affect people around them as well. But tobacco smoking, it's legal. In most jurisdictions, it is legal. And I would say, do we want to end up in a situation of having a nanny state that is so controlling that every aspect of our lives and personal choice is dictated to by the government? I mean, how would you legislate if, for example, let's say in the UK, tobacco smoking was suddenly made illegal, just completely illegal? Well, then ostensibly the police would have to enforce the law, which would mean they would have to knock on people's doors and say, are you smoking? And what does that do? It takes away their resources from, for example, tackling violent crime. I really think that as it stands, there is enough erosions of our freedom as it is. Now, the New Zealand policy might be good because it's targeting young people, and 13-year-olds should not be smoking, obviously. In Britain, I don't know about New Zealand, but if a shop sells to underage people, they could be fined, and rightly so. Um, but I think we need to be very wary about, put it this way, I don't know where this phrase comes from, but I think it's important. Some of the worst things in history have been done with good intentions. So the argument here is smoking's a bad habit, so let's try and eradicate it. That makes sense. But then when you start considering, well, there's a personal choice aspect in this. Are you going to criminalize people for ultimately what they're doing to themselves? And where do you draw the line? Do we ban all fast food because that can lead to obesity? That can lead to coronary problems. Do you ban alcohol? You'll end up with a society the Taliban would approve of. And I do have an instinctive unease about that sort of control. I don't like to see, the effects of smoking. I don't like to see people who are in their 50s looking like they're about 70. Smoking is a bad habit, and any smoker that says it isn't is deluded. I also think if you have young children, you need to consider them. Smokers shouldn't be selfish, they should consider their loved ones because their loved ones obviously don't want to see them die before their time. But I do think in democracies we are seeing a gradual erosion of freedom. This wouldn't be surprising if it was in a totalitarian state, but I have a big problem with freedoms being eroded, and oh, it's all for your own good, treating people like children. Um, it is fundamentally undemocratic and it's fundamentally controlling. So I guess time will tell how this New Zealand policy works. I don't know if it's going to be, well, ostensibly it's going to be harder for smokers in general. But does that mean New Zealand smokers are now going to be criminalized? Are they going to be stigmatized as if they're bad people? That's something I really have a problem with. And these people who look down on smokers, um, I would say to them, do you have no vices? Do you not enjoy the occasional spirit drink? Do you not indulge in perhaps chocolate or something. If you have, I personally think people who have no indulgences at all are pretty boring. I also think there's a slightly controlling aspect to them because they think they're better than other people, and it's something I have a problem with. I think you need to consider others. If you're a smoker, don't smoke around people if they're non-smoker. In your own home, it's a different matter. But I don't know. If you're from New Zealand, what do you think of this? I imagine some people would have a particular position. I mean, if you've lost a loved one to smoking, you'd probably fully welcome this. But I've known people who have lost relatives, I mean close relatives, parents, for example, and they're still against those sort of sweeping measures because they fundamentally believe in civil liberties and the right to choose. Um, that is precious. And frankly, the more that's taken away, the more that's legislated, you don't get it back. And I'm not saying that the right to smoke is the best hallmark of freedom, but so long as it's not illegal, it is a right. Um, and I do think freedom is under assault in this country. I think the legislation, the seemingly never-ending legislation we have with COVID, um, this new variant, oh well, we'll wear the masks. And maybe in January there'll be yet another lockdown. The uncertainty and the damage that's going to cause to businesses, to individuals, to people's lives. Um, and I have to say, those who are totally cavalier about it and totally okay, either they're complacent or they're inner totalitarians coming out. And frankly, some of them are in the healthcare industry. With all due respect to doctors, they save lives, they're good people, but they have to also respect the fact that people cherish civil liberties just as much as their health. And, you can look down on that. You can say, oh, they're an idiot. They're smoking. It's bad for them. But there is a fundamental, very important aspect about choice, about civil liberties, about freedom of conscience. If someone wants to have a bad habit, they should try and quit. But ultimately, that is their freedom of choice. So long as it's not affecting other people, i.e., they're not smoking on top of others. Because frankly, there's just too many freedoms being stripped away. I'm concerned about it. Um, Freedom of speech, freedom of activity. There's just too much being stripped away. I think the pandemic is being used as an excuse for a lot of this. And my goodness, with everything people have sacrificed to put this on top of it, I mean, I don't know how New Zealanders feel about that. If it's kind of compounding the restrictions they've ever already had from COVID, it should be said that. New Zealand has one of the lowest death rates in the world from COVID. I suppose their policy's been successful in that sense, but civil liberty, the right to choose, is such an important thing in a free society. It's so, so important. It's so precious. And I don't think we should just easily discard that, whether it be under the guise of public health or anything else. I mean, you could argue anything in the nature of public health. Um, like I say, ban all alcohol, ban fast food. It's for public health. Where do you draw a line? Let me know your thoughts.